we're not live yet. I'm going to wait for the preview to come through on the on the Instagram side.
There it is.
You got it? Okay, I just got it. So now we hit go live on here. It is a little bit of a trip because it's a little bit of
Yeah.
lag. All right, cool. I think we got it. I'm excited. We did it.
We done did it. We done did it.
We done did it. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for hopping on. 7 o'clock, 7:20 on a Monday. So, okay, we're starting our week off right. All right.
Yeah, hitting it hard from the beginning. I like it. I'm in.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. So, welcome, everybody. My name's Claudia Parada, and you can go ahead and introduce yourself if you'd like.
Yeah, my name is Juan Carlos de la Rosa, founder of the Modern Macho. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I was so excited when we were able to connect. So, for folks who don't know, okay, you go by Carlos, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Carlos connected with my husband with the book club and on some other stuff. So that's how I connected with you. And then Ariel was like, "Oh, you should like do something with Carlos." And I was like, "That's such a good idea. Like, of course." So we made it. We're here. We're doing it.
Yeah. Shout out to my boy Ariel. I just having the book club was dope, man. Getting to. I mean, I personally am not like a big reader. I struggle with this. So I think it was really cool to kind of build this community where we were able to hold each other accountable and then have conversations and bring a lot of different opinions, different ideas. And I remember my boy Idea like always bringing that wisdom, like his energy. I really always appreciated his vibe and just piggybacking off of each other. I think one of the things I could say that the book club really helped me with was really like understanding healthy levels of conflict. And I say
Mm,
that because we didn't always agree on things, and I
mhm.
really didn't see a lot of that growing up where opinions were really respected, right? Because even when they were, it was usually somebody getting louder than the other, and then
Right, right.
eventually someone decides to just take the L, you
Yeah.
know? And so to kind of be in a space where we're all just really listening to each other, validating each other, and just being open minded more than anything, right? And holding space for each other when we need to. So yeah, the book club was really amazing. I'm definitely glad uh, him and I were able to share space, and then look at here we are building more
Yeah.
community. So
I
once
love
again, thanks
that.
again for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think my favorite part of my journey in social media has been getting to actually know people for real. Like, I'm not in it for the likes. Like, I'm really or whatever. That's, like, not even a thing anymore. But, like, I'm not in it for the followers. I'm actually in it to, like, have authentic relationships with people. Like, I wanna know you, and I wanna know what you're about. Like, what's your work about? Let's collaborate. Like, so this was so cool to be able to do that. Um, yeah, and so, I mean, I work with first generation Latinx women, and I of course, I'm expanding, so I don't work exclusively with women, but I work with women and men, um, and also with BIPOC people. I'm a therapist, I'm a coach, and I'm also a diversity consultant for professional teams. But I would love to hear about, like, maybe you could give us like a little summary of what your work is. So we know that you have a book club because we mentioned it already, but maybe you can tell folks a little bit about what you got going on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first and foremost, I want to give you flowers and say thank you for the work that you do. Yeah, you're the real hero. I mean, like I said, it's I as I've gone through my own journey and having a little bit of more empathy than I've ever had and being able to step into other people's shoes, I'm like the fact that you have to flip a switch consistently and hold space and be there, and I'm like, and still like you're saying, like you're just a human just like I am, and you have a life just like I do. You got a family and all this stuff. Like,
Mhm.
man, I got nothing but love and respect. So thank you so much for all the work that you do.
I appreciate
So yeah, my name's Juan Carlos. A lot of people know me as Carlos. I'm the founder of the Modern Macho, which was really nothing more than an idea. My best friend and I decided that around the time of the pandemic, wanted to start a podcast and really start having conversations around mental health, around masculinity, around parenting. I hit an all-time low in my life. as a tradesman myself. I'm an electrician, so I've been
Mhm,
doing that for the last 10 years. I'm now doing more of a role as a project manager in the office side. But during that time, there was a lot of being able to hang out with the guys, being able to drink with the guys, being able to build things with the guys, and do a lot of these manly things, right? And yet, I still didn't feel like I was grown enough, like I was taken seriously, like I was a quote unquote man. And so I was really struggling with that. And went down a very dark road, was ready to really take my life. Drinking was a lot that was helping me cope. Drugs was a big part that was helping me cope too. I didn't have the tools to process and to deal with the things that I was going through, or sometimes even to vocally express what I was going through, right? No sense of community. And I was trying to do everything by myself. And so um, it ended up becoming me going to therapy. So I decided to try therapy out after a bunch of like tossing and turning and tried a couple times. The first two therapists that I tried to connect with, I was not vibing with them. I think the very
mhm.
first therapist I had, yeah, I remember her asking like, "Well, how do you feel from 1 to 10?" And I'm like, and mind you, like now I'm more comfortable with that. But dude, I'm this dude that like I go from talking smack all day with the guys at the bar, and then you put me in this virtual, this virtual space, and she's like, "Well, how do you feel from 1 to 10?" And I'm like, "Nah, dog, like this shit ain't it. I ain't doing this. Like, ain't no way, you know." I was like, "I'm out." And
I
so,
have to tell you that,
um,
yeah, I was like, "Will you please take it easy on our boys?" Not on our boys, but, like, on our men. It's you can't ask, like, the direct feeling questions. You need to scaffold it a little bit, and I'm like, "Okay, okay, okay.
yeah,
I hear you, I hear
you
you."
know, yeah, and you bring up a great point because that I think one of the beauties of having this platform and allowing myself to use my voice and to allow space for more men like myself to use theirs is it also not only helps us, but I think it helps the community understand like how to hold space for us,
Mhm,
because I think just like men need to speak up, I think others need to listen. Right. So it's this
mhm.
community effort of like, how do we all help each other out? And so, but anyway, so I started the podcast, and after going to therapy, I realized, well, I don't think I'm the only one. So let's talk
Mhm.
about this. And I'm like, I felt like I didn't resonate with a lot of what I was seeing, where I would hear a
Yeah.
story about like, this is how you become successful. And I'm like, bro, you have old money, or like,
Yeah.
you have all these things that I'm like, good for you, but I don't vibe with that. Or we talked about, hey, you should tell your kids you love them. And I'm like, I can't. I don't know if I could do that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I want
Mm,
my boy to be soft, and I get worried about that. Just a lot of things that I didn't see enough representation, and I was like, dude, let's just talk about it while we're going through it. And so
yeah,
essentially, that's what
absolutely.
started the podcast, was documenting the journey, which slowly turned into community events where we were hosting pool tournaments and getting guys together and using that money to sponsor men that wanted to go to therapy and that were ready and willing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is
Which
so cool.
translated into food drives, which translated into a book club, right?
That's so awesome.
Into social hours. And so we would do these virtual groups where we just come together and we're like, hey, you feel alone? That's crazy because I feel alone. And it's like, let's
Yeah,
talk about this shit. Let's see what happens. And so
yeah.
yeah, and here we are now, really continuing to document it. I've been very blessed and very lucky to meet a lot of amazing individuals that I was able to get trained to now facilitate spaces now for a nurturing fathers program with the County of Riverside. And so I volunteer with
That's
them,
so
helping,
tight.
yeah, fathers that are dealing with CPS cases, and it's been really really humbling and very beautiful to see fathers that are coming into this very like F this, like I'm fucking over it, that I resonate with, man. I'm like, I see myself, and seeing them frustrated because they're trying to do everything they can with the tools that they have,
Yeah.
and I don't think that they're being set up to fail. I just don't know that they're being set up to succeed. And so being able to be in this room and be like, damn, I vibe with y'all. Like we're not that
Mhm.
different. We really are trying. And if this is the only tools you have, well, this is what it looks like for you. And
Yeah,
so to see them go in 13 weeks from I don't want my kid to be soft to like, I don't need to spank my kid because there's a better way to still teach that
yeah.
lesson, is like, damn,
Mhm.
dog, like I'm here for it,
That's growth,
So,
totally. What an
so
honor
it's
to be
really
part of that
incredible.
transformation. Yeah.
Yeah, we get to do breathwork events too. I work with the therapist and a Reiki master, and yeah, that was another thing that like I didn't grow up with any of that. Breathwork
But
is
yeah.
like you just breathe, right? Like there's no intention behind that, and so
Are you gonna
getting
tell
to
me to
meet them.
be aware of my breath? Why do I need to do that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, for me, it was like if I needed a tool for my anchor, well, that was playing soccer,
Mhm.
or maybe sometimes doing push-ups
Sports.
or going for a run,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
which can be very helpful. But sometimes I can't tell my kid, hold up, let me go play a game of soccer and then come back.
Yeah,
Like
of course.
sometimes I need a tool that's like now, right? And
Yeah.
so when I found out the power of breath work, I'm like, hey, look, I didn't grow up with this stuff. I don't know anything about it. I'm also very intimidated. I also don't know how I feel about being in a space where it's a very female environment. Like it's intimidating. I also feel like I don't want to feel like less of a man. And so all these things that I knew that I didn't choose to have these beliefs growing up, but I
Mhm.
was making a choice to subscribe to them.
Mhm.
So it was like a very conflicting thing, and so I'm like, "Well, let me create a space for men like myself that just wanna try new things," and so we would do the breathwork events, and we're getting 20 guys to go inside of this
That's
room and
so
just like,
tight.
"Yo, let's try to breathe together," and so it's been a very, 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 amazing, and I feel very grateful to be able to do this and, to see how much it brings me closer to my son and to my village, I think has probably
Mhm.
been the most rewarding thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many things about what it is that you said. I know that you mentioned hitting rock bottom and that you were having thoughts of suicide and coping with alcohol, and I just wanna say, I'm so glad that you got the support, and I'm so glad that you're here and alive to tell the story, and that you,
Thank
like,
you.
really sought out that help and you were able to access it, and look how much you have to share because of, like, your lived experience and how many lives you get to touch because of it. Like, how special is that?
Yeah, no, for sure, I appreciate that. Thank you,
Mhm.
thank you.
Yeah, and there's something so like, we live in a time where, like, I feel like people want the answer. Like, "Okay, so, like, give me the 1, 2, 3. How can I get from A to B?" But it is a vulnerable and courageous thing to tell somebody, "Hey, I'm still learning. Like, I'm still in my process of understanding something, understanding who I am or, like, how I wanna do this, how I wanna navigate this thing." It's like that what I would call the inquiry, right? Like, the self-inquiry. And you're like, "Alright, and I'm gonna, like, let people into that." You're not like, "I'm the all-knowing expert and I have all these answers." You're like, "Oh, I'm gonna let people into this process." And through that sharing process, other people can be seen and witnessed in their own, which I think is so, so special.
No, I
Mhm.
appreciate the flowers on that. Yeah, I think it's definitely taken a lot of work and a lot of very amazing individuals that came into my life too. To I think to get to where I'm at, and as to your point, right, lifelong learner, like it never ends.
Mhm.
But I think it's been very liberating. It's been very liberating to know that I don't have to have it all together.
Yeah.
That I don't need to have it figured out. That I can be angry. I had someone just tell me recently too that like when you're angry, when you're frustrated, like you show it. And I think a big part of that is because I think there's a lot of power in being able to model what that looks like,
Yeah.
right? And for me, it was like if you want to show how you handle your anger, don't make it disappear. And
Mhm.
learning that like it's just an emotion. Like I was
Yeah.
exhausting myself trying to figure out how to get rid of anger, and
Right.
anger was such a bad emotion, and it wasn't the emotion, it was the actions tied to it because of my upbringing,
Yeah.
right? And there was a lot of spanking, there was a lot of yelling, there was a lot of shaming, and so when I would think of myself getting angry, it was just like, "Oh, I'm turning into a piece of shit. Like, I gotta get rid of this. I gotta get rid of this." And
Mhm.
not knowing that it's like, hey, the effort that I was putting into that can go instead into tools that can help me
Yeah.
how to manage that. Right. And so that was like such a new, like, and what's interesting is I'll be fully transparent. I straight up thought like that's some white people shit. Like
No,
this is
I
this
think
is
a
what
lot of
like,
people
bruh,
think that. No,
like
I think that a lot of people are like, healthy conflict, mindfulness, like, that's some white people shit.
dude, and I can't tell you how many times, and so like there's two parts to that. One was like if we don't talk about it, like unfortunately we mentioned this before a little bit, like the cancel culture, and it's like, man, like
Yeah.
if I don't have a space where I'm like, hey, I'm not saying that I'm about it, but like that's just how I was brought up to believe it. So can I share how I feel so that maybe we can get somewhere with it? And so that took me a long time to be like, damn, that's some white people shit. And what's interesting is even as I've been getting to have more conversations with men, meeting more amazing people, working more with dads and hearing their stories, and I'm like, bruh, it's not necessarily a white people thing. Like some of these guys that I've been in these spaces where I've accepted and been like, yo, I was wrong, bro. Like
Mhm.
I was wrong because I always thought like you're white. Like you're all happy in this cute little white picket fence home, and you don't understand my struggle. And then once we start cutting into these layers, like, wow, bro, like we a lot of what you felt, I felt too.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it's breaking that barrier. And I'm like, these are the conversations they don't want us to have, you know?
Yeah. That's so, so interesting. I mean, when I think about, like, that willingness to seek a different perspective or just, like, be like, maybe I subscribe to something that I'm not even sure that I believe. I mean, I think it definitely goes to kind of like our topic, right? Where we're thinking about, like, we're in Pride Month, and this kind of just like came about organically in a conversation that we had prior to this, was just like, damn, there are things that were handed to me. There are beliefs that were handed to me that I don't know that I actually believe that. Like, but I have like feelings about it in my body and in my emotions that make it feel true, like objectively, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when we don't resonate, like I said, when there's lack of representation, I think sometimes it's hard to listen to that, right? Like there's I know for myself, it's
It-
like there was a way to
yeah.
protect myself from the uncomfortable, so I would justify, right? So like we could be having this conversation and I could be resonating, but I like it gets so uncomfortable that I'm like, it's because you're a woman. It's because you have
Oh,
blonde hair.
that is
You know what I mean? Like
so
it's because
interesting.
it's because you're wearing earrings. You don't get it. Like I would protect myself any way that I could. Where I'm like,
That
no,
is so
you don't.
interesting. No, you
And
don't get it because I'm different from you.
exactly, exactly. And
Wow,
I've
okay.
learned in my experience, I learned of it. It was what I really was saying is I'm afraid. Like I'm afraid to look at this head on. And so I'm trying to deflect and protect myself any way that I can. And
Damn, hella awareness.
I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that all the accountability that I ever had a lot of shame tied to it.
Mhm.
Like there was no like, oh, you made a mistake. All right, let's fix it. It was like, oh yeah, you fix it, but also and it's like, fuck, I'm tired of that shit. So I'm not gonna
Yeah,
hold myself accountable anymore. Like I'm over it, you know?
yeah. Well, so you said so much interesting stuff, right? So, like, even just thinking about the topic at hand, we're thinking about homophobia and the Latinx community, right? So it's like, well, if you don't see it, like, if it's kind of like Bruno from, what was that movie?
Oh yeah, with not Jonah Hill. Was it Michael Cera?
No, 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 sorry. We don't talk about
Oh,
Bruno.
Bruno
Yeah,
from
yeah,
dang,
yeah.
why am I drawing a
You know
blank
what I'm talking
now?
about.
But yes, I know what you're talking
Somebody in
about. I
the
know what you're talking
comments,
about.
please tell us.
Please save us.
But, whole thing about, like, there are certain taboo topics that our families just don't address. Like, okay, so, we all have somebody in our family that's gay, queer, lesbian, right? So it's just like, that is probably 100% accurate. And, I mean, I don't know the statistics, so I don't know if that's not the actual statistic, but I'm just
Sure.
saying, like, that is either not talked about or talked shit about or excommunicated. Like, it's just like, that's kind of like the way that it goes. I don't know if that's your experience, but I feel like, so speaking from lived experience, it would be like, oh, I had this friend. My parents would be like, I had this friend, and you know what? She's actually a lesbian. And but we don't really talk anymore. So that's that. Love her,
Right,
that's not,
right.
I don't agree with her life, but that's that. And so it's kind of just like
Yeah.
really interesting to see how much distance was created, growing up. Because it's like, I just don't really, like, I didn't really have that exposure like early on.
Yeah, and I think that I'm glad that you shared that because I think that that's kind of like the perfect example of how yeah, I mean, right, like the book, like the body keeps score, right? Because it's like this conflict between. It's almost like when when I've said this before, like I'm not racist, but what
Right.
usually what follows that is some racist ass shit,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
and
I
I
love you,
really think
but
that not exactly, and I think not having the tools, as you say, that I'm reflecting, and I'm like, I think sometimes what it is this conflict between like I don't really stand by these things. I don't really want to subscribe to these things, but for some reason, like I'm sticking to it, and I've one of the things that we discuss in the parenting program is we talk about the importance, especially as fathers, of like just how important it is for us to be present with our kids, right? And being able to tell our kids that we love them. And, you know, I always find it very interesting how we're looking at it's a 2 hour class lesson for the week on
Mhm.
how we should show up for our kids and tell them we love them, right? Like that's it for that week out of the 13 weeks.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, yeah, but we're missing there, and going back to the representation and the understanding and the empathy is like that's a whole week though of discussing why we're concerned that our boys are going to turn into girls if we tell them we love them,
Mm,
which is
that's
not
so,
true.
like
Yet
no, yeah.
it's such a reality for a lot, and it's conflicting because what's dope about this space is that we're not talking about it because we're proud of that, because we're just as confused and we're just as frustrated about that. We don't know how to navigate that, right? And a lot of times, sadly, right, I've done this where I was projecting this on my kid because I was concerned about what my friends were going to think of me or what the people around me
Mm,
were going to think. And so it's just very cool and very healing, and being able to be in a space where we're heard and where we can be vulnerable and understand, like, hey bro, you don't have to feel that from me, and then we go, oh dang, so now let's just
yes.
love our kids for who they are. And if we still feel a certain way about certain things, then at least we're taking those things out of the equation, and then we can address them accordingly, right? But I think a lot of these predetermined beliefs and values that I know I carried for a long time, I was just subscribing to things that, I mean, in high school for me, it was like, hey, homework's due tomorrow. Oh, that's gay. And now I'm like, what does that even mean?
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah,
But again, I subscribed to something because it was a norm. It was a norm, and I had no
yeah,
idea even just, like, the impact and what it was doing to me, just, like, drinking all the time, right?
yeah.
Um, but it's really hard, dude. It's really hard when it was hard for me to have empathy and put myself in other people's shoes when I never felt like anyone put themselves in mine.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally like, you're to me, it's so I don't know what the live obviously, I'm not a man, so I don't have that lived experience, but I feel like what I see in at least in the Latinx community is, like, there has been a lot of misattunement between parent and child. And then at a very young age for boys, like, you go out into the world and they're just telling you, "Be a man, like, don't show any emotion, or the only emotion that you can show is anger, and, like, present yourself in a certain way, and, like, this is just how it is." From really, really, like, depending on what neighborhoods you're in, from really, really tender ages. So young. And my dad, like, tells my five-year-old, like, "No, you gotta be macho, you have to be a man." And I'm like, what are you actually telling him? Like, you're telling him not to feel what he's feeling? Like, because
Right.
that's, like, you brushing aside an emotional experience, you're not actually helping him regulate his what he's feeling or understanding what he's feeling anyway. You're just saying, "No, just be strong. Just be this. Just be a man." Which is actually, like, a very broad concept. Anyway, I might be getting lost there,
Yeah.
but
No, 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 no. I love this. And before we continue, real quick, because I see my boy Joe's there in the chat, I want to give him a shout out, man, because
oh, cool.
that's again another gentleman that even I feel like I've been able to have good conversations with him, and I've been learning a lot of where I've been wrong, and learning about the importance of fatherhood, and seeing the great thing that he does as a dad. And I'm like, I love learning from him. I love having conversations. So Joe, shout out to you, bro.
Hey.
Um, but you bring up a great point, which I think is again going back to projections. I think that I know for me, there was a lot of, and the dads that I've been working with in the program, there's a lot of fears tied to making sure that our kids can take care of themselves. And unfortunately, through us not having the tools of embracing those emotions, we give the tools to them so that they can be quote unquote strong, which is really
Yeah,
what we're trying to say, right? And so
yeah,
I think that's what's been really cool too, is like taking away the beauty of that, right? Because I think sometimes we think it becomes a very binary thing, right? Where it's like, do I be the authoritarian, right? Or do I be passive, which is like either I lay down the law and I have this really stand up kid, or I become a passive parent where I'm just like, do what you want, right? And
Yeah, they're gonna just be all whatever. Mhm.
exactly, and that's what we see, right? And to be honest with you, 9 times out of 10, I would even be like, "Yeah, I would do the same thing," right? Like, to let my kid let loose and do whatever, it just makes more sense to me to throw all this structure into that, you know? And so then to learn more about, like, an authoritative role, right?
Mhm.
Which is more of a leader, more of a captain, right? Just like on a
Yeah.
soccer team, like, I have my role, you have yours. I have influence, not control, right? And taking away, like, what is it that we're worried about? We're worried that our kids become more emotionally intelligent, right? They can take care of themselves, you know, they can show up for themselves and for others. And it's like, yo, that's dope. Let's hold on to that. Well, how are we doing that? By yelling, by shaming, by, okay, all right, maybe
Mm.
we, and giving ourselves grace, dude. Giving ourselves grace is everything, because one of the things that really sucked for me, and I think sucks sometimes in this journey, is like once you start having more awareness of the things that I was doing, the more I started realizing how much I was hurting the people around me. And I was like,
Mhm.
fuck,
Yeah.
you know? And so I'm grateful for therapy, that as I was figuring those things out, I was also learning, like, hey, bro, where did that come from?
Yeah.
You know, where did these tools that you're using here, you got them from somewhere. Where did they come from?
Yeah.
You know, so it's not fair that you're just gonna sit here and call yourself a piece of shit for the rest of your life when those are the tools that you were given. You know, and
Yeah.
so that at that
Sounds
point,
like
it's like
that's
it's my
yeah.
responsibility. It's my responsibility to learn that, figure that part out, take the good from it, get rid of the parts I don't want, and why not add some new things to the tool belt as well, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm hearing, like, when you're talking about that, I'm thinking about just, like, the different systems at play. So, it's like, you know, you're internalizing your the way that you see yourself, the way that you see the world, because based on the messages that you received, whether that so it's from your like family, your community, and then the greater collective culture. But then that's always constantly getting reinforced, like broadly and then on a micro level. So for you to be able to, it's actually like it's definitely possible and it happens all the time. But like to actually do that work, it does take community and strength. You can't do it alone. And like to say to somebody, "Hey, I'm having thoughts about like things that I was taught that like I thought to be correct. Actually, like I'm bumping up against that and um I don't necessarily know if that's true anymore." That's like a really vulnerable thing to share and express and kind of like flip and be like, "Do I believe this?" Because especially like when we're children, like that sense of like you're shaking your sense of self, right? Like you're saying, "All right, here's everything I know to be true about myself in the world," and I'm like shaking it up and changing it.
Right.
Um, which requires, I think, a lot of support around how to stay regulated around that. Like, how do you continue to truck on forward around that sort of inquiry when like, you know, you still have all of these things in life and like all this emotion coming out. Anyway, so maybe I'm babbling, but
Oh, you're not. I
rambling,
think
I mean.
you're bringing up a lot of great points though, and I think that's like I said. I think a lot of it is all that gray area in the middle that sometimes doesn't get addressed or sometimes isn't taken into account. And I think that that requires again that level of empathy. I like for me, I was a woman hater for a while. I was a woman hater for a
Damn, I didn't
while.
know
Like
this about you.
man, like,
Okay.
and like I said, it was because and granted, like I speak about this now because I figured out where it came from, and just for a while, it was like never never to the point of expressing it because I was smart enough to know that that wasn't okay, but it was like it was so triggering for me to hear women talk about like women power, independence, because I
Oh,
was always like I'm not against that, but like fuck that, you know, like all these feelings that and all these thoughts that would come up for
okay.
me, but I'm like, I don't know where they're coming from, but like fuck, right? Like trying to suppress them without knowing how to validate them and figure out what
Yeah,
the
like,
deeper meaning
damn, I
was.
have a feeling right now,
Yo,
like, I'm having a
yo,
reaction. Yeah.
and here's the thing is like, so then I start doing my digging and I'm like, well, shit. I've been conditioned since a kid to be a wallet. Look, Carlos, your job, we're going to teach you how to reject love, be a man, you reject love. And on top of that, your value is going to be based strictly on how much money you bring to the table.
That's
That's
so deep.
that determines the kind of man that you're gonna be, and then based on all that effort, then we decide whether you should be loved or not.
Damn.
So now I'm, like, in my 20s, and here we're talking about, like, I got my own job, and I'm like, "What the fuck?" My
Yeah,
identity has told me that I was supposed to do this, and now you're doing it. What am I left with? So, and why do I say that? Because the anger I had was so valid, and it continues to be valid, which is why I do this work, is
yeah,
because it's robbing me of a really happy and liberating life.
yeah.
However, that's not your fault. That's not women like
No,
that's
no, but here's the fucked up part, is that as a woman, then the narrative is you need to find a man who, is gonna provide and protect you, which
mm,
is like, okay, so if I'm like, not only did you internalize that value, but then you're also out meeting people who are reinforcing that,
yeah,
like, all the time, like, in your interactions. It's not like you're making it up. It's not my responsibility, no, but, like, I definitely not me personally, but, like, as a woman,
sure.
somebody who you meet might just reinforce that as well.
Yeah,
So,
and you bring up a great point, which is it's fucked all of us, right? And this is why when I first had this conversation, like even something what we just talked about, and I appreciate you listening and sharing that, because it took me years to get to a point where I was like, nah, because I'm not trying to come at women sideways, but like, damn, I feel like everyone's pointing fingers at me, and holding myself accountable, but then feeling like I wasn't being seen, I wasn't being heard, and then seeing how it's kind of affected all of us because while I don't think that some of those traditional values are necessarily wrong, I think the problem becomes when there's the expectation, right? When
so that's you're
when
just what you said was like, "I'm only this." Like, my
exactly.
value is only tied to this one thing, which is like, that's so dehumanizing.
Yeah, and dude, for me, I mean, early 20s, and I didn't know how to cook for myself. So there was this other part of it to your
My god,
point
imagine
where,
if my value was only tied to me cooking, that would be so sad.
dude, and then that's what I'm saying. Like I think about it and I'm like, well shit, like my mom, my grandma, like they never left me. Like they never let me do these things, right? Like they never allowed me to do it because it was like the women do that. Like take care of the men, take care of the men, take care of the men. And so um all of us just kind of thinking like this is how it's supposed to go. And I'm like, well, I don't want to play by those rules and I don't want to do that. And
Yeah,
now
100%.
and now I'm like in my 20s and I'm like, okay, well, how the fuck do I learn how to cook? Because who am I going to tell that I don't know how to do this? And who's actually going to help me? And who is, you know what
Mhm.
I mean? And so, and that's why I think, like, I think of my boy Joe earlier, where it's like some of the basic survival needs. Sometimes the machismo was so present in our home that it was like you were not responsible for your own needs; somebody else was.
Mm,
And the dynamics that started to create in my friendships, in my
yep.
relationships. I
Mhm.
mean, and so I share all that because I'm not justifying it, but I think it's important that we bring these things to the table when we're having these conversations, right? Because
Yeah.
one of the first things we talk about too is like having our needs met. And it's like, who's responsible for our basic needs, right? Our food, our shelter, our water. It's like me. And I always like share the story, like I laugh about it, right? And always having the permission of the guys is like, who's responsible for food? Me. Okay, did you get your needs met yesterday? Well, no, I was struggling. What happened? Well, it's because my wife, man, she didn't come.
Oh.
Right? And
Oh.
so, but it's like, okay, cool. Like, I love that you shared that because that tells me that these are the beliefs that we have, bro. Let's talk about that. What does that mean? And then getting to the point where we're like, well, shit, probably be it would benefit me. What could I teach my kids? What kind of cycles would we be breaking? And how would that actually help me build a better connection with my relationship where it's
Mhm.
not based off of these transactional type of things, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing you talk about, like, the process overall, and I do see it really connected to how we begin to unlearn homophobia, right? Because you're like, 1, you're talking about a level of self-awareness that does require, like, some inquiry here, right? You're like, "Okay, hey, I'm having a feeling, like, I'm having a reaction to something. Cool, what's that about?" Like, where did that come from? Which is exactly what it is that you're saying. Like, where did I learn this? Where did that come from? And then like some reality testing around it. Like, is that actually real? Like, is whatever I'm feeling or fearing actually for real? But then like the powerful thing that it is that you're saying is like you're bringing that to somebody and saying like, "Hey, I'm having this feeling and I'm not actually sure that that's like the real thing." So it's like I think that there is a lot of fear that happens that's just like, all right, if I'm scared, so I'm not gonna even, like, touch that topic. Like, I mean, we've talked a little bit about homophobia throughout our conversation today, but it's not like we've done I mean, I don't have an answer as to, like, how to eradicate it, right? But I think
Sure.
at the foundation is, like, hey, like, bringing in some self-awareness around, "Hmm, is this actually, like, a thing that I'm should be subscribing to? Because what's
Yeah.
actually happening, right? Like, am I just not able to tolerate an uncomfortable conversation? And how come? You know?
Yeah, I definitely think there's I mean, man, there's so many layers to that, right? I think there's parts of it that maybe I mean, I think the healing journey for me for sure is a privilege, right? Like being able to have
Mm.
all my needs met in order to to reflect and to have this level of self-awareness, and even sometimes having to be checked, I'm like, shit, I was wrong about that. Like, I'm here for
Mhm.
it. Um, but I think that it really takes tools to really sit down and reflect on a lot of these things. And the part that's very interesting to me, and as someone that still sometimes maybe not to that extreme, but I know that like I actually get excited to like even look back at this conversation maybe in 6 months and a year and be like, damn,
Mhm.
look at the shit that I was wrong about, or like, man, you know what I mean, like that
What a wonderful way to what a
like,
wonderful
that gets me
reframe.
excited, and, it wasn't long ago that it was like, "No, I wanted control," because unfortunately, I was brought up in a very right or wrong type of environment where it's like, if you know what I mean? If either you're right about it or shut the fuck up, and even feelings, right? Even like you said, like a valid opinion of like, I don't need it to be correct, this is how I'm feeling. Like, the whole concept of something being valid is just a couple years old for me, because before that, it was
Yeah.
like, "Shut up," right? Like, it's not about how you're feeling, and so even learning how to find balance with that, like knowing that some things are valid, but that it's still wrong.
Yeah, wait, so hold on. You're saying that knowing that somebody's experience is valid but still wrong?
No, 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 no. Like
Okay.
me having a certain thought about something can still be a
Oh,
valid
oh,
thought. Like no one's ever
oh!
gonna
Okay,
take that
got
away.
you, got you,
But
got
it's
you.
like, hey, like, hey, Carlos, but we still need like that's valid. Don't beat yourself up over it. But let's figure out where that's coming from,
Yeah.
because that's still wrong. Like, you know what I
Yes,
mean? Like
yes,
that's
yes,
still
yes, yes.
not like it's still not cool, Like I
Yeah,
said, the simple concept of like for me thinking that I don't want to teach my son how to be in the kitchen because I'm worried that he's going to turn into he's going to become my daughter. It's like,
yeah,
okay, that's a valid thought. That's a valid thought. Where is that
right.
coming
I'm
from? Because
thinking
the
it. Yeah, I'm
belief is
thinking
still,
it. All right.
yeah,
Okay. I know why I'm thinking it, but do I need to think that?
yeah. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, I think it's a lot of tools. It's a lot of stuff that, especially for me as a dad, it's like I'm really learning that I'm able to do more for him by taking care of myself and
yeah,
modeling these things. Because at some point, like I said, we lose control and we gain influence, right? And
yeah.
so at
I
some
mean, you're
point, it's
talking
like, what am
about,
I
like
teaching him?
you're talking about, like, having the capacity to hold nuance. You're like, "Wow, I really moved from this black and white space where I'm like, here's a right and wrong thing," and you're really talking about holding or I'm sorry, growing your capacity to hold a gray. You're like, maybe I don't have this right. You're just like,
Ugh.
maybe I don't have this right. Maybe what I thought to be true about if my son cooks, he's gonna turn into a girl is not an accurate thought,
Yeah. And
even
you know
though
what?
the
Like the
feeling in your body
homophobia.
still might be there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. And the homophobia was so deeply ingrained for me growing up that like I look back now and not once did I ever think about the kind of values or like the kind of beliefs. And like I never thought about those things and how I wanted to model that for my son. Like so
Mhm.
many like things that I was like, man, let me show up for him in ways that are good for. Not once did I ever think about that because I was so caught up on this concept of just like, just don't be a girl, just don't be a girl, just don't be a girl, And I'm like, bruh,
Yeah.
like I thought of myself and I'm like, you're straight. And how'd that work out for you, bud? Like I had to like reflect to myself, not to say, you know what I mean? But it was just like, dude, what are we really holding on to here? And what are we really afraid of?
Yeah, 100%.
It's
Yeah, I
hard, dude.
mean,
It's hard and
yeah,
hard. It's hard to be like, I'm scared or like, I feel insecure or I
yeah.
don't know. I had an older gentleman and I remember being on a job site and kind of sharing some things with him that I was kind of processing with the girlfriend at the time, and like kind of expecting this advice where he would just basically tell me like, forget her, you know what I mean? Like the usual advice that I was getting growing up,
Okay, okay.
that was just like feeding my ego, telling me like, yeah, she's wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I remember him saying, and this sticks with me to this day, was, what do you care about more, being right or connecting with your person?
Oh,
And I was like,
being
"Fuck."
right. No, I'm just
But
kidding.
dude, hey, I'll tell you what, man. I like, I still, even my pop sometimes has these things, right? And like, it's conversations that him and I get to have now, which are really cool. Um, but yeah, like, there was no, what do you mean connecting? And I think
Mhm.
the first thing I thought of wasn't even like, oh, that makes sense. Let me go work on that. No, my first thought was like, that fucking makes sense because I've walked away from situations where I'm like, fuck yeah, I was right. But I still had a shitty time because here I was, like, not having a good time for the rest of the night, and it was like, "Fuck, was it even worth it?"
Yeah, for sure. But so you're saying like, but you're talking about the thing that it is that we've been saying, which is like, you actually don't have to completely abandon yourself to take on another perspective. You're like,
Absolutely not.
oh, just because maybe I am right, but that doesn't mean that I can feel connected here.
Yeah, we can coexist.
Yeah. And so, I mean, also, like, if you didn't necessarily have like someone showing you how to attune or like how to be connected to yourself or how to have empathy or compassion for your own self, then like that right or wrong thinking also is going to translate to
Yeah.
like your interpersonal and like your worldviews too. So it's like, of course, this becomes very challenging to be like humanizing another person if you don't feel that internally. Not correct, like, not right. I'm sorry, not that it's not right, but it's not like it's very it can be very limiting.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember when I first learned no, you're absolutely right. I remember the first time I learned about, like, healthy levels of conflict and understanding how, like, figuring out what our needs are, right? So that we both get our needs
Yeah.
met.
Nonviolent
And
communication.
and I was just like, "What?" Like, "Nah, someone's taking the L." Like, you know what I mean? It's like it's either you or me. And so, and then the thing was that is that I was like, "Well, no, I do know how to communicate healthy because I take the L's. Like, I'm okay with
Oh,
that,
yeah,
right?"
so that's the
And
other
so,
side.
yeah, so it's like,
I can
okay,
lose.
I'm maturing. I'm maturing because I can take the L's. But then I'm like, then dude, I'm fucking petty though. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm
and then
like,
you're
so
resentful and pass not you, but, like, anybody. Then
sure,
it's
sure,
like
sure,
you're
sure. And
resentful and
I'll
passive
speak
aggressive.
I'll speak an I, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like I'm telling myself that I'm maturing because I'm okay with it's not about being right, but I'm like, fuck, I took the L, but at the same time, like here I am just feeling crappy all day, or I'm irritated, or I'm
Yeah,
being petty, and I'm like,
because
shit,
your
like
needs aren't getting met when you just, like, whatever, give up.
yeah, and then understanding like, hey man, what is it that you needed? Well, you just needed quality time together. What did I need? Well, I needed to go hang out with like spend some time with my friends. Oh,
Yeah,
cool. Like we ended up having dinner and then I ended up going and it's like, damn, we both won. What?
yeah.
But
Mhm.
again, it goes back to tools. And sometimes I know for me, I did not have those tools. It wasn't modeled to me. It was either very passive or it was just very, very aggressive. And like for me, it just made more sense to be more passive about things than to flip out. But again, then I didn't set boundaries for myself, and here I am becoming resentful. Here I am becoming upset. Here I am. I mean, it was bad. I was when I was younger. I've shared this before. Like I was cheating. I was disrespecting. Like there was a lot of things that I was doing that when I finally reached the point where I was like, shit ain't right. I had to look at all of that and find the yes and find there was something that good within all that, and I was like, "You were seeking connection.
Mhm.
You were seeking connect you felt seen, and I'm like, "Oh, this is why I was doing these things." Don't lose that.
Yeah.
We just gotta find it in better ways.
Yeah, I mean, I really hear you talking about, like, how I mean, to me, anyway, the way that I'm hearing that is, like, how it really is, like, all intersectional. It's like, if you
Absolutely.
can, at the crux of all of it, recognize that you're seeking connection, then you could also hold that empathy for somebody else. It's like, okay, well, why the fuck would I need to be homophobic if that person wants to see connection in the way that they want to seek it? Like, I can connect to myself, I can connect to them, they can connect with whoever the fuck they want to. That's fine.
Right,
Um,
right.
And like there's like that return back to universal needs because you had like you're working on those skills, the skills of awareness and the skills of regulation and healthy expression, and understanding. And then you're like, oh, I have a need, you have a need, great, like we can both have needs that are different and I'm actually can tolerate that.
Sure,
Hmm.
sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, even the concept of needs, again, like with my kid, I was spinning my wheels trying to figure out how to solve problems. And then I would ask myself, like, what does he need? And I'm like, I don't know. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Carlos, you're trying to solve a problem that you don't like, you're trying to find solutions to a problem you don't know,
Hmm.
and sometimes even like flipping out on my village over it. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful to have community. I'm grateful now to have tools. I'm grateful to be in spaces where I get to have conversations like this and tell younger versions of myself, or men that I get to learn from, that I'm like, yo, what do we need? What are we looking for? And for a lot of us, it's something that we've never even been asked. So there's this expectation of like how we need to show up as husbands, how we need to show up as fathers,
Hmm.
how we need to show up as brothers. And it's like, love them, love them, love them, but then me being asked, "How do you like to be loved?" And it's like, "What the fuck?" It's like, how are
Yeah.
you trying to be good
Wait,
at
what?
something that you haven't been allowed to do, man?
Yeah. Hmm. Okay. So we're at time. We're at
Oh, big
time.
buzzer.
Hard pivot. Hard pivot. We're at time. But is there anything that you want to leave folks with, or?
I think the biggest thing with Father's Day coming up, I really want to invite our community to hopefully just be a little more open, right? Being open to understanding of like why we don't open up. When's the last time a father's been asked, you know, why does he struggle with it? What do you need? How do you like to be loved? Right. I think celebration is very important, especially around this time. And also encouraging my boys to start practicing those things, right? Because like myself, being resentful for times where I wasn't celebrated, I also wasn't practicing how to communicate those things. It was like this expectation of like,
Yeah.
how
Mhm.
come you don't love me? But it's like, okay, well, how do you? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about it, And so I
Yeah, for
think
sure.
all of us, I think, inviting everyone really to maybe do a little bit of reflecting on that, and like, how do we all like to be loved, right? And knowing
Yeah.
that it's all valid, right? Understanding more about that, figuring out what our needs are. I do want to invite any gentleman that's listening that resonates with any of this information. To come hang out. We get together once a month. We find breweries and coffee shops around the IE, and we just
You
link
have something
up. We
coming
get
up this
together.
weekend, don't you? Or was that last weekend?
No, we had a little brunch for Father's Day last weekend. This next one's coming up on the 29th, actually.
Oh,
So we
cool.
haven't picked a location. I usually uh, well, I'm promoting it now, but usually I'll post it up later on this week, and then you send a DM. We'll shoot you an email, and usually the week of is when we'll shoot the email of this specific location where we're going to
Okay.
meet at. So more than likely a Saturday morning coffee session, but
Nice. So,
highly, highly
right,
recommend.
Riverside area, is that where you're at?
Yeah, we've gone to like Pomona area, but in Claremont, we've done Riverside. So anywhere really in within the IE is predominantly where we're at.
Inland Empire.
Inland Empire, yeah. Sorry, I forget you're up north, man.
So, I'm in
So yeah,
San
Inland Empire. That's
Francisco,
right. I forget.
yes.
My bad. My bad. Yeah,
So,
Inland Empire. So
the
I'm about like an hour. I'm about an hour east of LA.
okay. I mean, everything's LA to me. It's either LA or San Diego or
Yeah.
Palm Springs. But it's okay, that's fine. I mean, that sounds awesome. So for folks that are out there, of course, like, I encourage you to go connect with Carlos. For folks that are up in the Bay, my Latinx femmes, my Latinas, I'm gonna be hosting a Cafecito, Conchas, and Chisme event that I, like, just launched. I'm so excited about. It's gonna
Nice.
be at Cafe de la Olla on the when is it? Whenever Thursday the 20th, I think that's when it is at 6. So for it's free, come and join me and come and hang out, build
Love that.
community. It's gonna be so awesome. And just thank you so much to you, Carlos, for being I know that being open to meeting and chatting and then doing a live. I know that you're busy. So um
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. I also, real quick,
thank you so much.
being Men's Mental Health Month too, the podcast is still up. We've kind
Yes.
of taken a break on that, but there's a lot of episodes there, a lot of interviews with therapists, a lot of interviews with men that have stories. The Modern Macho, you can find it on Spotify. We also have the latest episodes with, we've done Reiki masters and therapists, and really trying to bring more of who they are as humans, right? Because I used to see teachers growing up at the store, and I was like, "What the fuck? Like, isn't there like special stores for y'all or something?" Like, I didn't know that. It's like they're just as human as I am, and so really trying to bring that piece in, and hopefully create a less of an intimidating environment for men that are on the fence about it. So those episodes are up on YouTube. Definitely recommend anybody to check it out. If you know anybody that's going through some stuff that needs a community or some space, please, please, please send them our way.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So thank you so much to you. I hope you get some rest this evening. It is officially late o'clock.
Yes.
So
Yes. Thank you to everybody that joined too.
yeah, thank
Appreciate
you
it.
to
Thank you for your
everybody who
time. Thanks for
joined.
having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great. We'll connect. We'll keep connecting.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Bye bye.